Victoria Ashford slammed her $800 Mont Blanc pen onto the plaintiff's table so hard it cracked. "Your Honor, look at him," she spat, pointing at the black man sitting alone across the aisle. "A electrician. A nobody. And he thinks he can steal my sister's $15 million estate." Marcus Thompson gripped the photograph in his hands, his dying wife's last smile, and said nothing. Victoria laughed. "He doesn't even have a lawyer. This is over." But Victoria made one fatal mistake. She forgot to ask about Marcus's mother. When those courtroom doors exploded open 20 minutes later, Victoria's designer smile didn't just disappear. Her entire world collapsed. Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. The clock on the wall of courtroom 304 read 9:47 a.m. when Marcus Thompson walked through the heavy oak doors of the Manhattan Civil Courthouse for what he believed would be the worst day of his life. He was wrong. It would be the second worst. The worst had been 6 months ago, holding Evelyn's hand in that hospital room, watching the monitors go flat, hearing his 8-year-old daughter Lily screaming in the hallway. But this was a different kind of death. This was the death of everything Evelyn had fought to protect. Marcus adjusted his tie. It was the same navy blue tie he'd worn to Evelyn's funeral. The same tie she'd bought him for their 10th anniversary, laughing as she straightened it in front of their bathroom mirror. "You clean up good for an electrician, Marcus Thompson," she'd said. "And you married me anyway," he'd replied. "Best decision I ever made." Now that tie felt like a noose. He walked down the center aisle past the wooden benches, past the few spectators who'd wandered in for the morning's entertainment. His work boots, the only dress shoes he owned, had been pawned last month for grocery money echoed against the marble floor. At the defendant's table, he stopped. Empty. No lawyer, no paralegal, no stack of legal documents, just a single manila folder containing everything he had left. Evelyn's death certificate, their marriage license, and the will that Victoria Ashford claimed was forged. Marcus sat down heavily. He placed the photograph of Evelyn and Lily on the table in front of him, positioning it so they faced him, so they could give him strength. "I'm trying, baby," he whispered. "I'm trying." Across the aisle, the plaintiff's table was a different universe. Victoria Ashford sat like a queen holding court. Her white Chanel suit probably cost more than Marcus made in 3 months. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun that made her angular face look even sharper. Even sitting, she radiated the kind of power that came from never hearing the word no. Beside her sat Harrison Blake, senior partner at Blake Morrison and Associates. Marcus had Googled him last night on the library computer. Blake charged $1,200 an hour. He'd never lost an estate case in 15 years. Legal blogs called him the inheritance killer. Behind them sat 2 junior associates, a paralegal, and what looked like a forensic accountant, all with matching leather briefcases and matching expressions of bored superiority. Victoria caught Marcus looking. She smiled the kind of smile a cat gives a cornered mouse and leaned over to whisper something to Blake. They both laughed. Marcus looked away. He focused on the photograph, on Evelyn's eyes, on the strength she'd always seen in him, even when he couldn't see it himself. "All rise." The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of the courtroom. Everyone stood as Judge Lawrence Henderson swept in, his black robes billowing behind him. He was a severe-looking man in his 60s, with steel-gray hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd seen humanity at its worst and was no longer impressed. "Be seated," Henderson commanded. He opened the file in front of him, adjusting his reading glasses. Case number 24-CV0847. In the matter of the estate of Evelyn Ashford Thompson, Victoria Ashford petitioner versus Marcus Thompson respondent. Henderson looked up. His eyes swept the courtroom landing, first on the plaintiff's table, the army of lawyers, the perfectly organized documents, and then on the defendant's table. On Marcus, alone. "Mr. Thompson." Judge Henderson said, his voice neutral, but his eyes sharp. "I see you are unrepresented. Are you expecting counsel?" Marcus stood. His legs felt unsteady. No, Your Honor, I couldn't afford— He couldn't afford a lawyer because he doesn't have any money of his own. Victoria interrupted, rising to her feet. Everything he has, he stole from my sister. Ms. Ashford. Henderson's voice cracked like a whip. You will wait to be addressed. Victoria sat back down, but the damage was done. The words hung in the air like poison. Harrison Blake stood smoothly buttoning his jacket. My apologies for my client's outburst, Your Honor. She is understandably emotional. She lost her sister 6 months ago, and watching the man she believes responsible for her death attempt to profit from it is difficult. Marcus felt the words like a physical blow. I would never. Mr. Thompson. Henderson held up a hand. You'll have your opportunity to speak. Mr. Blake, please summarize your client's petition. Blake walked to the podium like a man who owned the room. He probably did, Marcus thought. Men like Blake always owned the room. Your Honor, the facts of this case are simple but tragic. Victoria Ashford's sister, Evelyn Ashford Thompson, passed away from complications of breast cancer on March 15th of this year. She left behind a substantial estate valued at approximately $23 million, including a penthouse apartment on Fifth Avenue, a vacation home in the Hamptons investment portfolios, and various other assets. Blake paused, letting the numbers sink in for the gallery. 2 weeks after her death, Mr. Thompson produced a will allegedly signed by the deceased, leaving the entirety of this estate to himself and his daughter. Ms. Ashford contends that this will is fraudulent, that Mr. Thompson, a licensed electrician with no significant assets of his own, manipulated his dying wife into signing documents she did not understand, or, alternatively, forged her signature entirely. Marcus gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. That's a lie. Evelyn wrote that will herself. Mr. Thompson. Henderson's voice was sharp. You will have your turn. Marcus forced himself to sit back. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Blake continued, smooth as silk. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Thompson systematically isolated the deceased from her family over the course of their 12-year marriage. He moved her away from her childhood home, discouraged contact with her sister, and positioned himself as her sole support system, a classic pattern of financial elder abuse. She wasn't elderly, Marcus said, unable to stop himself. She was 43 years old. The pattern remains the same, Blake said, not even looking at Marcus. Isolation, manipulation, control, and now attempted theft of a family fortune that took 3 generations of Ashfords to build. Judge Henderson made a note. And what remedy does your client seek? We are asking the court to invalidate the fraudulent will and restore the estate to its rightful heir, Victoria Ashford, the deceased's only living blood relative. We are also asking for a full forensic investigation into Mr. Thompson's finances, and we reserve the right to pursue criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. Criminal charges. The words hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. He could lose everything. He could go to prison. And Lily. God, what would happen to Lily Blake? Returned to his seat, exchanging a small nod with Victoria. The first round was over, and Marcus was already bleeding. Mr. Thompson. Judge Henderson's voice pulled Marcus back to the present. Would you like to respond? Marcus stood again. His mouth was dry. He had prepared a speech last night, written it out on a yellow legal pad, rehearsed it in front of the bathroom mirror while Lily slept. But now, facing the judge, facing Victoria's smirk, facing the weight of everything he was about to lose, the words evaporated. Your Honor, His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. I loved my wife. I loved Evelyn more than anything in this world, except our daughter. I didn't marry her for money. I didn't even know she had money until we'd been together for 2 years. Victoria snorted loudly. Blake placed a restraining hand on her arm. We met at a community center in Brooklyn. Marcus continued, his voice growing steadier as the memories flooded back. She was volunteering at a literacy program. I was there fixing the electrical panel. She didn't tell me her last name was Ashford. She didn't tell me her family owned half the commercial real estate in Manhattan. She just talked to me, like I was a person, like I mattered. He looked down at the photograph on the table. Evelyn's smile. Lily's eyes, her mother's eyes. We dated for a year before she told me the truth. She was scared, Your Honor. Scared that I would look at her differently, that I would want her money instead of her. Marcus shook his head. I didn't care about the money. I still don't. But Evelyn, she wanted Lily to be taken care of. She wanted to make sure that if anything happened to her, our daughter would be okay. So she wrote a will leaving you everything? Blake interjected, his tone dripping with skepticism. A convenient story, Mr. Thompson. It's not a story, Marcus said, turning to face the lawyer directly. It's the truth. The will was written by Evelyn's own hand, witnessed by 3 people, and notarized by a licensed notary public. She was of sound mind. She knew exactly what she was doing. Then why? Victoria spoke up, her voice sharp as broken glass. Did she never mention this will to me? Why did she never tell her own sister that she was cutting her out of the family fortune? Marcus met Victoria's eyes. Because you hadn't spoken to her in 10 years. The courtroom went quiet. Victoria's face flushed red. That's a lie. Is it? Marcus pulled a piece of paper from his manila folder. I have the phone records, Ms. Ashford. In the last decade of Evelyn's life, you called her exactly 3 times. Once, when your father died, to inform her she wasn't welcome at the funeral. Once, when you needed her signature on a real estate document. And once, Marcus's voice caught. Once, when she was diagnosed with cancer, you called to ask if she'd updated her will. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's mouth opened and closed. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Your Honor, Blake said quickly, rising to his feet. This is all very emotional, but it's irrelevant to the legal question before the court. The validity of the will is what matters, not family dynamics. Family dynamics are exactly what matter, Marcus shot back. Ms. Ashford didn't care about Evelyn when she was alive. She only cares now because she wants the money. The same money she... Marcus stopped. He'd promised himself he wouldn't say it. Not yet. Not without proof. The same money she... What, Mr. Thompson? Judge Henderson leaned forward, interested. Marcus shook his head. Nothing, Your Honor. I withdraw the comment. But the seed was planted. Henderson's eyes lingered on Marcus for a moment, then shifted to Victoria. Ms. Ashford, the judge said slowly. Mr. Thompson makes a serious accusation about the nature of your relationship with your sister. Would you care to respond? Victoria stood, smoothing her suit jacket. When she spoke, her voice was controlled, almost rehearsed. My sister and I had a complicated relationship, Your Honor. She made choices I didn't agree with, specifically her choice to marry Mr. Thompson against the wishes of our entire family. Against your wishes, you mean? Marcus said. Against everyone's wishes, Victoria snapped, dropping the composure. Our father told her that if she married you, she was dead to us, and she chose you anyway. She threw away her family, her inheritance, her entire life for what? For a man who fixes light switches for a living. I fix a lot more than light switches, Marcus said quietly. And I was there for her, every day, every treatment, every sleepless night. Where were you, Ms. Ashford? Where were you when she was dying? Victoria's face twisted with rage. Don't you dare. I was there. Marcus continued, his voice rising. I held her hand. I told her she was beautiful when the chemo took her hair. I carried her to the bathroom when she was too weak to walk. I promised her that I would take care of Lily, that I would make sure our daughter knew how much her mother loved her. He was crying now. He didn't care. I was there, Ms. Ashford. I was there when she took her last breath. I was there when she closed her eyes and didn't open them again. I was there. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. Where were you?" The courtroom was silent. Even Blake had stopped taking notes. Victoria stood frozen, her face a mask of conflicting emotions: anger, guilt, something that might have been shame. Then slowly her expression hardened. The mask slipped back into place. "Your Honor," Victoria said, her voice ice cold. "This emotional display is exactly what I'm talking about. Mr. Thompson is a manipulator. He manipulated my sister, and now he's trying to manipulate this court. I am asking for justice. I am asking for my family's legacy to be protected from this grifter." She spat the last word like poison. Harrison Blake stood up. "Your Honor, given the seriousness of these allegations, we request that the court proceed immediately with a preliminary judgment on the will's validity. Mr. Thompson has no legal representation, no expert witnesses, and no evidence beyond his own self-serving testimony. The outcome is clear." "The outcome is clear," Victoria echoed, looking directly at Marcus. "You lose." Judge Henderson was silent for a long moment. He looked at the documents in front of him. He looked at Blake and Victoria, the expensive lawyers, the overwhelming resources. Then he looked at Marcus. Alone. "Mr. Thompson," Henderson said finally, "the petitioner makes a valid point. You are unrepresented in a case involving complex estate law, forensic document analysis, and significant financial interests. I cannot in good conscience allow you to proceed without counsel. The risk of error is too great." Marcus felt his heart stop. "Your Honor, I can't afford." "I understand." Henderson held up a hand. "But the law requires me to ensure a fair proceeding. If you cannot produce an attorney within the next—" He checked his watch. 10 minutes. I will have no choice but to proceed with the petitioner's motion for an expedited judgment." 10 minutes. 10 minutes to find a lawyer he couldn't afford in a courthouse full of attorneys who charged more per hour than he made in a week. It was impossible. Victoria smiled, not even trying to hide her satisfaction anymore. "Your Honor," Blake said smoothly. "While we appreciate the court's concern for fairness, I must point out that Mr. Thompson has had 6 months to retain counsel. His failure to do so is not our problem." "Failure?" Marcus's voice cracked. "She froze my accounts. The accounts Evelyn set up for us. I can't access my own money. I've been living on credit card cash advances and the charity of friends. How am I supposed to pay for a lawyer when I can't even pay for groceries?" "That's a serious allegation, Mr. Thompson." Henderson's eyes narrowed. "Can you prove it?" Marcus pulled another document from his folder. "This is a letter from First National Bank dated 3 weeks after Evelyn's death. It states that all accounts held jointly with Evelyn Ashford Thompson have been frozen, pending a legal review initiated by—" He looked at Victoria. "Victoria Ashford acting as executor of a previous will that she claims supersedes mine." "It does supersede yours," Victoria said, "because yours is fake." "The will you're talking about is from 2012, Marcus shot back. "Evelyn wrote a new will in 2023. It revokes all previous wills. Standard language. Any first-year law student knows that. Unless the newer will is a forgery." Blake's voice was calm, reasonable. "Which is exactly what we're alleging." Marcus felt the walls closing in. Every argument he made was countered. Every piece of evidence he presented was dismissed. He was drowning, and there was no one to throw him a rope. "Your Honor," Victoria stood, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I understand that this is difficult for Mr. Thompson. Losing my sister was hard on all of us. But the law is the law. He has no representation. He has no credible defense. I am asking the court to end this charade and allow my family to grieve in peace." She looked at Marcus with something like pity. "You can keep the photograph, Marcus. You can keep your memories. But everything else, the apartment, the houses, the money that belongs to the Ashford family, it always has." Marcus stared at the photograph of Evelyn, At her smile. At the life they'd built together. At the daughter waiting for him at home, probably sitting by the window watching for his car. What would he tell her? How could he explain that he'd failed, that he'd lost everything her mother had left for them? "I'm sorry, Evelyn," he whispered so quietly that no one else could hear. "I tried." Judge Henderson cleared his throat. He picked up his gavel. "If there are no further," boom. The double doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They exploded inward with enough force to rattle the frames, the sound echoing through the chamber like a thunderclap. Every head in the room turned. Marcus turned. And his heart stopped for the second time that morning. Standing in the doorway was a woman he hadn't seen in 20 years. A woman he'd believed he would never see again. She was 72 years old, but she stood with the posture of a 4-star general. Her silver hair was cropped short, elegant, precise. She wore an ivory suit that probably cost more than Victoria's entire wardrobe. Her dark skin seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. Behind her stood 4 people, 3 men and 1 woman, all carrying thick leather briefcases. They moved in perfect formation, like Secret Service agents protecting the president. The woman in ivory didn't rush. She walked down the center aisle with measured steps, her heels clicking against the marble in a rhythm that seemed to count down something, counting down to what Marcus didn't know. But Victoria Ashford apparently did, because Victoria's face had gone white. Not pink, not pale, white, the color of someone who has just seen a ghost. "No," Victoria whispered. "That's impossible." Harrison Blake was staring too, his mouth slightly open, his legendary composure cracking. "It can't be. She's supposed to be in Geneva." The woman reached the defendant's table. She didn't look at Marcus. Not yet. She turned slowly, deliberately, and fixed her gaze on Victoria Ashford. When she smiled, it was the smile of a shark circling wounded prey. "Ms. Ashford," the woman said, her voice filling the courtroom without any need to shout. It was a voice accustomed to addressing the Supreme Court, the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the International Court of Justice. "I apologize for my tardiness. I was filing some paperwork with the State Attorney General's office regarding certain irregularities in your company's financial statements." Victoria's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Judge Henderson leaned forward, his eyes wide. "Counselor, please identify yourself for the record." The woman reached into her jacket and produced a business card. She handed it to the bailiff, who carried it to the judge with something approaching reverence. "My name is Eleanor Simmons," she said. "Senior partner at Simmons, Chen & Associates. Former counsel to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Member of the bar in New York, California, the District of Columbia, and before the International Court of Justice at The Hague." She paused, letting the credentials sink in. Then she turned and looked at Marcus for the first time in 2 decades. Her eyes, the same eyes he saw every morning in his own mirror, softened. Just for a moment. "I am also," Eleanor said, "his mother." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He could only stare at the woman who had raised him, who had pushed him to succeed, who had disowned him when he chose a different path, the woman who had just walked back into his life at the exact moment he needed her most. "Mom." His voice was barely a whisper. Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. It was the first time she'd touched him in 20 years. Her grip was firm, steady, exactly as he remembered. "Not now," she said quietly. "We'll talk later. Right now, I have work to do." She turned back to the court, her expression hardening into something that made even Judge Henderson sit up straighter. "Your Honor," Eleanor Simmons announced, "I am entering my appearance as counsel for the defendant Marcus Thompson, and I am here to inform this court that everything the petitioner has alleged is not just wrong, it is a deliberate, calculated fraud." She looked at Victoria, then at Harrison Blake. "And before this day is over, I intend to prove it." The courtroom remained frozen for 3 full seconds after Eleanor Simmons finished speaking. 3 seconds of absolute silence, broken only by the soft whir of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Then, chaos erupted. Harrison Blake shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This is completely improper. We've had no notice of new counsel. We've had no time to prepare for—" "Sit down, Mr. Blake." Judge Henderson's voice cut through the noise like a blade. His eyes hadn't left Eleanor Simmons since she'd identified herself. "The court will hear from Ms. Simmons." Blake's mouth opened to protest, but something in Henderson's expression stopped him. He sat down slowly, his face flushed with anger. Eleanor stepped forward, moving past Marcus toward the center of the courtroom. She walked like she owned the space, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned her place in rooms like this 1,000 times over. "Your Honor," she began, "I apologize for my dramatic entrance. I was delayed by traffic on the FDR, and by the need to make several urgent phone calls to federal authorities." "Federal authorities?" Victoria's voice cracked. "What federal authorities?" Eleanor didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on the judge. "I'll get to that, Ms. Ashford. Patience." Victoria's face twisted with rage. "You can't just walk in here and—" "Ms. Ashford." Henderson banged his gavel. "One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt. This is my courtroom, not yours." Victoria's lawyer grabbed her arm, pulling her back into her seat. He whispered something urgently in her ear. Victoria's jaw clenched, but she stayed silent. Eleanor continued, as if there had been no interruption. "Your Honor, I understand that this case has been presented to you as a simple matter of a contested will. The petitioner claims the will is forged. The respondent claims it's genuine. On the surface, it appears to be a he said, she said situation." She paused, reaching into her briefcase. "But it's not even close." She pulled out a thick folder and handed it to the bailiff. "I'd like to enter this into evidence as Exhibit A. It contains bank records, wire transfer confirmations, and internal communications from Ashford Properties, LLC. Blake jumped up again. "Objection. We haven't had time to review this evidence. This is ambush litigation." "Ambush?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Blake, your client filed an emergency motion 3 weeks ago to freeze my son's bank accounts. She did so without notice, without a hearing, and without giving him any opportunity to respond. She has been conducting ambush litigation since the moment my daughter-in-law died." "She's not your daughter-in-law," Victoria spat. "You disowned your son 20 years ago. You have no standing to—" "I have standing," Eleanor said coldly, "because Marcus asked me to represent him. That's all the standing I need." She turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, may I proceed?" Henderson nodded slowly. "You may. But I want to understand something first." He looked at Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, you told this court you had no legal representation. You said you couldn't afford an attorney. And now your mother, a partner at one of the most prestigious civil rights law firms in the country, walks through those doors. Did you know she was coming?" Marcus stood up. His legs felt weak. "No, Your Honor, I didn't. He looked at his mother, struggling to find words. "I called her last night, for the first time in 20 years. I didn't think she would answer. But I did answer." Eleanor's voice softened just slightly. "I answered because regardless of what happened between us, Marcus is my son. And no one is going to railroad my son in a court of law while I'm still breathing." She straightened her jacket. "Now, if the court will allow me to present my evidence, I believe we can resolve this matter quickly." "Quickly?" Blake let out a harsh laugh. "Ms. Simmons, with all due respect, your reputation precedes you. We've all heard stories about your courtroom theatrics. But this is a straightforward estate dispute. Your client has no credible evidence, no expert witnesses, and no resources." Eleanor finished for him. "No money, no power?" She smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. "That's exactly what your client was counting on, wasn't it, Mr. Blake? That's why she froze his accounts." That's why she filed emergency motions and expedited hearings. She wanted to crush him before he could fight back. She took a step closer to the plaintiff's table. She almost succeeded. If Marcus hadn't called me last night, if I hadn't caught a red-eye from Washington, she would have succeeded. The judge would have issued a default judgment, and your client would have walked out of here with $23 million that doesn't belong to her. It does belong to her, Blake insisted. Evelyn Ashford Thompson was Victoria's sister. The Ashford family fortune. The Ashford family fortune, Eleanor interrupted, was not built by Victoria Ashford. It was built by Evelyn's grandfather, expanded by Evelyn's father, and managed until his death 3 years ago by Evelyn's uncle. Victoria Ashford has never contributed a single dollar to that fortune. She has only spent it. Victoria's face went red. That's not... In fact... Eleanor continued pulling another document from her folder. Victoria Ashford has spent quite a lot of it. According to her company's financial statements, which I should note were supposed to be confidential, but were carelessly stored on an unsecured cloud server, Ashford Properties LLC is currently $8.7 million in debt. The courtroom went silent. Victoria looked like she'd been slapped. How did you... I told you. Eleanor's voice was ice. Patience. We'll get there. She turned back to the judge. Your Honor, the petitioner has presented this case as a grieving sister trying to protect her family's legacy from a gold-digging husband. But the reality is exactly the opposite. Victoria Ashford is not trying to protect her sister's estate. She's trying to steal it because she needs the money to save her failing business and avoid personal bankruptcy. That's a lie. Victoria was on her feet, her composure completely shattered. I loved my sister. I'm doing this for her. You're doing this for yourself, Eleanor said calmly. You haven't spoken to your sister in 10 years. You didn't attend her wedding. You didn't visit her when she was sick. You didn't hold her hand when she died. But you showed up at the hospital within hours of her death to demand access to her financial records. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He hadn't known that. Evelyn had never told him. That's not... I was in shock. Victoria stammered. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking clearly enough to hire a forensic accountant before you hired a funeral director. Eleanor pulled out another document. Invoice dated March 16th, one day after Evelyn's death for forensic accounting services. The funeral wasn't until March 22nd. Victoria's lawyer put his hand on her shoulder, trying to push her back into her seat. Objection, Your Honor. This is all speculation and innuendo. Where's the proof that the will is authentic? I'm glad you asked. Eleanor nodded to one of her associates, a young black man in a crisp gray suit. He stepped forward carrying a laptop. This is Devin Mitchell, our digital forensics specialist. He's prepared a presentation that I think the court will find enlightening. Devin set up the laptop and connected it to the courtroom's display system. Within moments, a video appeared on the screen mounted on the wall. The video showed a hospital room. Evelyn Thompson lay in the bed, thin and pale, but alert. Her eyes were clear. A slight smile played on her lips. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't seen this video. He didn't know it existed. My name is Evelyn Ashford Thompson, the woman on the screen said. Her voice was weak but steady. Today is February 28th, 2023. I am making this video to accompany my last will and testament, which I am about to sign in the presence of 3 witnesses and a licensed notary public. The camera panned to show 3 people standing by the bed, 2 nurses and an elderly man with a notary stamp visible on the table beside him. I am making this will because I want to ensure that my husband Marcus Thompson and our daughter Lily Grace Thompson are protected after I'm gone. Evelyn paused, her eyes glistening. I love them more than anything in this world. Marcus has been my rock, my best friend, my everything. He didn't marry me for money. He married me because he loves me, the real me, not the Ashford name. She took a shaky breath. My sister Victoria will probably challenge this will. She's been waiting for years to get her hands on my share of the family money. But I want to make something very clear. Evelyn looked directly into the camera. Her voice grew stronger. I am of sound mind. I know exactly what I'm doing. I am leaving everything to Marcus and Lily. Victoria gets nothing. Not because I hate her, but because she made her choice 10 years ago when she cut me out of her life for marrying the man I love. A tear rolled down Evelyn's cheek. Victoria, if you're watching this, and I know you probably are because you're probably trying to take what isn't yours, I want you to know that I forgive you. I forgive you for choosing family pride over family love. But forgiveness doesn't mean I owe you anything. You made your choice. Now live with it. The video continued showing Evelyn signing the will, the witnesses signing, the notary applying his stamp. Every step of the process was documented clear as day. When the video ended, the courtroom was silent. Marcus was crying. He didn't try to hide it. Seeing Evelyn's face, hearing her voice, watching her fight for him even from beyond the grave, it broke something inside him. Something that needed to be broken. Victoria sat frozen, her face ashen. All her arguments, all her accusations, all her carefully constructed lies destroyed in 3 minutes of video. Your Honor, Eleanor said quietly, I submit this video as Exhibit B. As you can see, the will was not forged. It was not the product of manipulation or coercion. It was the deliberate, informed decision of a dying woman who wanted to protect the people she loved. Judge Henderson cleared his throat. He looked shaken. Mr. Blake, does the petitioner wish to respond? Blake stood slowly. He looked like a man who had just watched his case collapse around him. Your Honor, we need time to authenticate this video. We need to verify. Verify what? Eleanor cut in. The video is date-stamped. The witnesses are identified. The notary is a licensed professional who will testify under oath. What exactly do you need to verify? The video could be fabricated, Blake said weakly. Deepfake technology is not what created this video. Devon spoke for the first time, his voice calm and professional. I've already conducted a forensic analysis. The metadata is intact. The video has not been altered, edited, or manipulated in any way. I'm prepared to testify to that effect, and I can provide independent verification from 2 other digital forensics experts if the court requires it. Blake sat down heavily. He leaned over to whisper with Victoria, but Victoria wasn't listening. She was staring at the now blank screen, her expression unreadable. Your Honor, Eleanor continued, in light of this evidence, I move to dismiss the petitioner's claims in their entirety. The will is authentic. There is no basis for fraud allegations, and frankly, there never was. Objection, Blake said, but his heart wasn't in it. We haven't had time to review. Mr. Blake. Henderson's voice was tired. I've heard enough objections for one morning. The evidence is compelling. Unless you have something substantive to offer, I suggest you consult with your client about how she wishes to proceed. Blake and Victoria huddled together, whispering furiously. Marcus watched them, feeling a strange mixture of relief and vindication. For the first time since Evelyn's death, he felt like he could breathe. But Eleanor wasn't finished. Your Honor, I'm not done. Henderson raised an eyebrow. There's more. Much more. Eleanor's voice hardened. The video proves that the will is authentic, but it doesn't address the larger issue, the issue of why Victoria Ashford was so desperate to challenge it in the first place. She pulled out another folder. As I mentioned earlier, Ashford Properties is deeply in debt. Ms. Ashford has been hemorrhaging money for years, making bad investments, overspending on personal luxuries, and most importantly, borrowing heavily against assets she doesn't actually own. Victoria's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Eleanor ignored her. 6 months ago, 2 weeks before Evelyn's death, Victoria Ashford took out a loan from a private equity firm called Ironclad Capital. The amount was $2 million. The collateral... She paused. The Fifth Avenue penthouse that belonged to Evelyn. Marcus felt his stomach drop. She used Evelyn's apartment as collateral. How is that possible? It shouldn't have been possible, Eleanor said. The apartment was in a family trust. Any use of trust assets as collateral requires the signatures of all beneficiaries. Evelyn never signed any loan documents. She held up a piece of paper. But someone did. Someone signed Evelyn's name on a loan agreement dated February 1st, 2023. The implications hung in the air like smoke. February 1st, Marcus repeated slowly. Evelyn was in the hospital on February 1st. She was too weak to hold a pen. Exactly. Eleanor's voice was grim. The signature on this loan document is a forgery, and there's only one person who could have forged it. Every eye in the courtroom turned to Victoria Ashford. Victoria's face was white. Her hands were shaking. That's not Harrison, do something. Blake stood up, but he looked like a man drowning. Your Honor, these are extremely serious allegations. We need time to... Time to what? Eleanor asked. Time to destroy evidence. Time to fabricate an alibi. Your Honor, I've already forwarded this evidence to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit and the New York State Attorney General's office. Investigators are standing by. If the court wishes, I can have them here within the hour. The color drained from Blake's face. FBI. Wire fraud is a federal crime, Mr. Blake. Using a forged signature to obtain a $2 million loan crosses state lines when the lender is based in Connecticut, which Ironclad Capital is. That makes it federal jurisdiction. Victoria stood up so fast her chair fell over. This is insane. You can't do this. You're making things up. Sit down, Ms. Ashford. Henderson's voice was dangerous. Sit down right now, or I will have the bailiff restrain you. Victoria didn't sit. She turned to Marcus, her face twisted with rage and fear. This is your fault. All of this. You poisoned my sister against me. You turned her against her own family. And now you're trying to destroy me. Marcus stood his ground. I didn't do anything, Victoria. You did this to yourself. I was supposed to inherit everything, Victoria screamed. The company, the properties, the money. It was all supposed to be mine. But she threw it all away for you. A nobody. A nothing. She gave up everything for a black man who fixes wires for a living. The words hung in the air, ugly and raw. Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes blazing. And there it is, the real reason you cut your sister out of your life. The real reason you couldn't stand her marriage. It wasn't about money or family legacy. It was about race. I'm not racist, Victoria sputtered. I just meant, we all heard what you meant. Eleanor's voice was ice. And so did the court reporter who has been recording every word of this hearing. Victoria looked at the court reporter, then at the judge, then at the spectators in the gallery, many of whom were now holding up their phones recording. She had just destroyed herself in front of witnesses. Your Honor, Eleanor said, I think we've heard enough. I move for an immediate ruling on the validity of the will, and I request that the court refer this matter to the appropriate authorities for criminal investigation. Judge Henderson nodded slowly. He looked exhausted, disgusted, and angry all at once. Mr. Blake, does your client wish to make any further statements? Blake didn't answer. He was already packing his briefcase, distancing himself from the wreckage. Harrison. Victoria grabbed his arm. You can't leave me. You're my lawyer. Not anymore. Blake pulled his arm free. Your Honor, I move to withdraw as counsel for the petitioner. Motion granted, Henderson said. Ms. Ashford, you have the right to retain new counsel. Given the seriousness of the allegations against you, I strongly suggest you do so immediately. Victoria stood alone at the plaintiff's table, abandoned by her lawyer, exposed by her own words, watching her carefully constructed world collapse around her. Eleanor gathered her documents calmly, methodically. She looked at Marcus and gave him a small nod, not a smile, not yet, but something approaching acknowledgement. They still had 20 years of silence between them. 20 years of hurt, of misunderstanding, of choices that couldn't be taken back. But right now, in this moment, None of that mattered. What mattered was that Marcus wasn't alone anymore. And Victoria Ashford was about to learn that justice, when it finally arrives, doesn't announce itself with a whisper. It kicks down the door. Victoria Ashford stood alone at the plaintiff's table, her designer suit suddenly looking like a costume, her carefully constructed armor crumbling piece by piece. The silence in the courtroom pressed against her like a physical weight. "Your Honor," she said, her voice cracking. "I need a recess. I need time to—" "You've had 6 months, Ms. Ashford." Judge Henderson's voice carried no sympathy. 6 months to prepare your case. 6 months to manufacture evidence. 6 months to torment a grieving widower and his daughter. You don't get more time. Victoria's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. "This isn't fair. She's twisting everything. I'm the victim here. My sister." "Your sister is dead," Eleanor said quietly. The words cut through Victoria's protests like a scalpel. "She's dead, and instead of mourning her, you tried to steal from her husband and orphan her child. Don't you dare talk to this court about fairness." Marcus watched the exchange, still reeling from everything that had happened in the last hour. His mother, the woman who hadn't spoken to him in 2 decades, had just dismantled Victoria's entire case with surgical precision. Part of him wanted to feel triumphant, but mostly he just felt tired. Tired and sad and overwhelmed by the complexity of it all. "Your Honor," Eleanor continued, "before we proceed to judgment, there's one more matter I need to address." Henderson raised an eyebrow. "More?" "I'm afraid so." Eleanor turned to face the gallery, where a handful of spectators sat watching the proceedings with rapt attention. "Ms. Ashford's fraud extends beyond the forged loan documents. It extends beyond her attempt to steal her sister's estate. It goes to the very heart of why Evelyn Ashford Thompson died alone in that hospital room with only her husband by her side." Victoria's head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor walked slowly toward the plaintiff's table, her heels clicking against the marble floor. When Evelyn was first diagnosed with breast cancer 3 years ago, she had options. Excellent options. The tumor was caught early. With aggressive treatment, her oncologist gave her an 85% survival rate. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He remembered those early days, the hope they'd felt, the plans they'd made. "But aggressive treatment is expensive," Eleanor continued. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs were substantial. Evelyn needed access to her trust fund, the fund her father had set up for her before his death. She stopped directly in front of Victoria. "Do you want to tell the court what happened when Evelyn tried to access that fund, Ms. Ashford? Or should I—" Victoria's face had gone gray. "I don't know what you're—" "The Ashford Family Trust," Eleanor said, pulling another document from her seemingly bottomless briefcase, "requires the approval of all surviving trustees for any withdrawal exceeding $50,000. After Evelyn's father died, there were 2 trustees remaining, Evelyn herself and her sister Victoria." The pieces clicked into place in Marcus's mind. He felt sick. Evelyn requested a withdrawal of $200,000 to cover her treatment costs. Eleanor continued. The request was denied. The trustee who denied it. She turned to face the judge. Victoria Ashford. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Henderson banged his gavel. "Order! Order!" "That's a lie," Victoria screamed. She never asked me for— I have the trust documents right here." Eleanor held up a thick sheaf of papers. Request dated April 15, 2021. Denial dated April 17, 2021. Signed by Victoria Ashford, co-trustee. She handed the documents to the bailiff, who carried them to the judge. Marcus couldn't breathe. He hadn't known. Evelyn had never told him. She'd said the trust was complicated, that there were legal issues, that they'd figure it out. She'd never said that her own sister had refused to help her. "Evelyn," Marcus whispered, "why didn't you tell me?" Eleanor turned to look at her son. Her expression softened for just a moment. "Because she was protecting you. She knew how you'd react. She knew you'd confront Victoria, and she was afraid of what that might cost you. So she kept it to herself. She found other ways to pay for her treatment, cheaper treatments, less effective treatments. She fought with everything she had. Eleanor's voice caught. She paused, composing herself. But it wasn't enough. The cancer spread. And by the time she was able to access her trust funds after filing a lawsuit that took 18 months to resolve, it was too late. The cancer had metastasized. Marcus felt the tears streaming down his face. He didn't try to stop them. He thought of all those nights Evelyn had cried in his arms, all the times she'd said she was scared, all the moments when he'd promised her everything would be okay. He hadn't known the full truth. He hadn't known that her own sister had essentially signed her death warrant. "You killed her," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. He stood up slowly, his body shaking with rage and grief. "You killed my wife." "I didn't kill anyone." Victoria backed away from the plaintiff's table, her eyes wild. "She had cancer. Cancer killed her. I didn't." "You denied her treatment." Marcus's voice grew stronger. "You had the power to help her, and you said no. You let her die because you were angry that she married me." "That's not, I didn't know it was that serious. She said it was routine. She said..." Eleanor cut in. According to the trust request documents, Evelyn explicitly stated that she needed the funds for cancer treatment. She included a letter from her oncologist describing the severity of her condition. "You knew exactly how serious it was, Ms. Ashford. You just didn't care." Victoria looked around the courtroom, desperate for an ally, desperate for someone to defend her. But Harrison Blake had already fled. The spectators stared at her with undisguised contempt. Even the bailiff, a man paid to remain neutral, couldn't hide his disgust. "Your Honor," Victoria pleaded, turning to the judge. "This woman is putting on a show. She's manipulating emotions. This isn't relevant to the estate case. My sister's medical decisions have nothing to do with..." "They have everything to do with it." Henderson's voice was cold. "You've presented yourself to this court as a grieving sister seeking justice. But the evidence suggests you're something very different. You're someone who let her sister suffer, watched her die, and then tried to profit from her death." Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. "Ms. Simmons," Henderson continued, "you mentioned earlier that you'd contacted federal authorities. Can you elaborate on that?" Eleanor nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. In addition to the wire fraud charges related to the forged loan documents, we've uncovered evidence of tax evasion, securities fraud, and possible violations of fiduciary duty in Ms. Ashford's management of the family trust. I've provided all relevant documentation to the FBI, the SEC, and the IRS." "The IRS?" Victoria's voice came out as a squeak. "You've been siphoning money from the Ashford family trust for years," Eleanor said. "Small amounts at first, then larger ones. You declared none of it as income. The total amount missing from the trust, according to our preliminary audit, is approximately $4.3 million. Victoria's legs gave out. She collapsed into her chair, her face in her hands. "I didn't. It was my money too. It was family money. I had a right to..." "You had a right to your share," Eleanor agreed. "A right you could have exercised through proper legal channels. Instead, you stole from a trust that was meant to benefit both sisters equally. And when your sister tried to access her portion for medical treatment, you blocked her, because if she withdrew her share, there wouldn't be enough left to cover what you'd already taken." The logic was horrifying in its clarity. Victoria hadn't just been greedy. She'd been covering her tracks, and her sister had paid the price. Marcus stared at the woman who had destroyed his family. He thought about Evelyn fighting so hard, never giving up hope. He thought about Lily, who would grow up without her mother. He thought about all the things Victoria had stolen from them, not just money, but time. Time that could never be recovered. "Why?" The word came out raw, broken. "Why did you hate her so much?" Victoria looked up. Her mascara was running her perfect facade completely shattered. For a moment, she looked almost human. "I didn't hate her," Victoria said, her voice barely audible. "I loved her. She was my big sister. She was supposed to..." She stopped struggling to compose herself. She was supposed to take care of me. After Mom died, after Dad got sick, she was supposed to be there. But she chose you. She chose a life that didn't include me. She abandoned the family. She didn't abandon you, Marcus said. You pushed her away. You told her she wasn't welcome at your father's funeral. You refused to meet your own niece. You cut her out because you couldn't stand that she was happy. She wasn't supposed to be happy. The words exploded out of Victoria, decades of resentment finally breaking free. She got everything. The looks, the brains, the charm. Everyone loved Evelyn. And what did I get? I got to be the other Ashford daughter. The lesser one. The one who wasn't quite as pretty, wasn't quite as smart, wasn't quite as special. She laughed bitterly. And then she married you, and suddenly she didn't need the family money anymore. She didn't need me anymore. She had this perfect little life with her perfect little family, and I was left with nothing but debt and a company that was falling apart. So you let her die, Marcus said flatly. Because you were jealous. I didn't let her die. I didn't help her live. Victoria's voice broke. There's a difference. No, Eleanor said quietly. There isn't. The courtroom fell silent. Outside, the sound of sirens grew closer. Judge Henderson cleared his throat. Ms. Ashford, given the serious criminal allegations that have been raised during this hearing, I'm going to take a short recess. During that recess, I strongly suggest you contact a criminal defense attorney. Criminal defense. Victoria looked up, panic in her eyes. But I haven't been charged with anything. As if in answer, the courtroom doors opened. 2 men in dark suits walked in, their badges visible on their belts. Victoria Ashford. The first man stepped forward. I'm Special Agent Morrison with the FBI. This is my partner, Special Agent Chen. We have a warrant for your arrest. Victoria stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. You're being charged with wire fraud, bank fraud, and tax evasion. Agent Morrison continued. Additional charges may be filed pending further investigation. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. This can't be happening, Victoria whispered. This isn't real. Agent Chen stepped forward with handcuffs. Please turn around, Ms. Ashford. Victoria looked at Marcus, then at Eleanor, then at the judge. She looked like a drowning woman searching for a lifeline, but there was none to be found. I'm sorry, she said, suddenly the words tumbling out. Marcus, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was scared. I was drowning in debt and I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I could just get the estate, I could fix everything. I could pay off the loans, save the company, start over. You're sorry. Marcus's voice was hollow. My wife is dead. My daughter has no mother, and you're sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know I can't take it back. But I need you to understand, I never wanted Evelyn to die. I never wanted any of this. But you made it happen anyway. Marcus turned away. He couldn't look at her anymore. That's the thing about consequences, Victoria. They don't care what you wanted. Agent Morrison took Victoria's arm and guided her toward the door. She didn't resist. All the fight had gone out of her. At the threshold, she stopped and looked back. Tell Lily, she started. Don't. Marcus cut her off. Don't you dare say her name. You don't get to talk about my daughter. You don't get to pretend you care about her after everything you've done. Victoria flinched as if she'd been slapped. Then she lowered her head and let the agents lead her away. The courtroom doors closed behind her with a heavy thud. For a long moment, no one moved. The spectators sat in stunned silence. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her machine. Even Judge Henderson seemed uncertain how to proceed. Eleanor walked over to Marcus and put a hand on his shoulder. It's over, she said quietly. Marcus shook his head. No. It's not over. It won't be over until I can go home and explain to Lily why she doesn't have a mother anymore. It won't be over until I can look in the mirror without seeing the face of the man who couldn't save his wife." "You did save her," Eleanor said. "You gave her 12 years of happiness. You gave her a daughter who is kind and brave and good. You gave her a home where she was loved. That matters, Marcus. That matters more than all the money in the world." Marcus looked at his mother, really looked at her for the first time since she'd walked through those doors. Her face was older than he remembered, lined with years of stress and sacrifice. But her eyes were the same fierce intelligence, the same unwavering determination. "Why did you come?" he asked. "After everything that happened between us, after I walked away from the law firm, from the career you wanted for me. Why did you come back?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "Because I made the same mistake Victoria made," she said. "I let my pride get in the way of my love. I pushed you away because you didn't follow the path I'd chosen for you. I told myself I was doing it for your own good, but the truth is, I was angry. Angry that you didn't become the person I wanted you to be." She took a deep breath. "I've had 20 years to think about that mistake. 20 years of wondering what my grandchild looks like. 20 years of missing birthdays and holidays, and all the little moments that make up a life. And last night when you called me, when I heard your voice for the first time in 2 decades, I realized something." "What?" "That you became exactly the person you were supposed to be. A good man, a loving husband, a devoted father. You didn't need my path to find your way. You found it yourself." Eleanor's eyes glistened. "I'm proud of you, Marcus. I should have said that a long time ago." Marcus felt something break inside him. Not the sharp, painful breaking of grief, but something softer. Something like release. "Mom," he said, the word strange and familiar on his tongue. Eleanor pulled him into a hug. It was awkward at first, they were both out of practice, but then Marcus's arms came up around her, and suddenly, 20 years of silence didn't seem quite so vast. Judge Henderson cleared his throat. "I hate to interrupt this moment, but we still have some legal matters to address." Eleanor and Marcus separated, both wiping their eyes. "Of course, Your Honor," Eleanor said, quickly composing herself. "My apologies." "No apology necessary." Henderson's voice was warmer than it had been all day. "I think we could all use a moment of humanity after what we've witnessed." He shuffled the papers in front of him. "Given the evidence presented today, I am prepared to issue an immediate ruling on the estate matter. The will produced by Mr. Thompson is authentic. The video evidence, the witness testimony, and the documented signatures all support its validity. The petitioner's claims of fraud are hereby dismissed." Marcus felt the tension drain from his shoulders. Finally. "Furthermore," Henderson continued, "I am ordering the immediate unfreezing of all accounts held jointly by Marcus Thompson and his late wife, Evelyn Ashford Thompson. Ms. Ashford's emergency motion was based on fraudulent premises and is hereby vacated." "Thank you, Your Honor," Marcus said. "I'm not finished." Henderson's expression grew serious. "I am also ordering a full audit of the Ashford Family Trust to be conducted by an independent accounting firm at the estate's expense. Any funds that were improperly withdrawn will be recovered and returned to their rightful beneficiaries." He looked at Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, your wife was denied access to funds that were legally hers, funds that might have saved her life. I can't undo that tragedy, but I can ensure that your daughter receives everything she's entitled to, and I intend to do exactly that." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "Finally," Henderson said, "I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for further investigation. The allegations against Victoria Ashford are serious and far-reaching. Federal authorities are already involved, but I want to ensure that state charges are considered as well." He set down his papers and looked at Marcus with something approaching compassion. "Mr. Thompson, I've been on this bench for 18 years. I've seen a lot of ugly cases, But what happened to you and your wife ranks among the worst. You were wronged by someone who should have been family. You were abandoned when you needed help most. And yet you didn't give up. You fought for your wife's memory and your daughter's future. Henderson banged his gavel. Case dismissed. Court is adjourned. The sound echoed through the chamber like a bell signaling the end of a long, dark night. Marcus stood there for a moment, unable to move. It was over. After 6 months of fear and uncertainty, after watching his bank accounts frozen, and his reputation attacked after being mocked and humiliated, and told he would lose everything, it was finally over. Eleanor gathered her documents and placed them neatly in her briefcase. Her associates had already packed up and were waiting by the door. "We should go," she said to Marcus. "There'll be press outside. Word travels fast in this city." Marcus looked at the photograph of Evelyn still sitting on the table where he'd placed it that morning. He picked it up carefully, running his thumb over her face. "I did it, baby," he whispered. "I kept my promise." He slipped the photograph into his jacket pocket close to his heart. Eleanor was already walking toward the door, but she paused, looking back at her son. "Marcus, there's someone else you need to call. Someone who's been waiting at home, probably worried sick." Lily. Marcus's heart clenched. In the chaos of the morning, he'd almost forgotten. His daughter was with the neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, probably sitting by the window watching for his car. He pulled out his phone and dialed. The phone rang twice before a small voice answered. "Daddy?" "Hey, baby girl." Marcus's voice cracked. "I'm coming home." "Did you win? Did the bad lady lose?" Marcus looked at the empty plaintiff's table, at the chair where Victoria had sat just minutes ago before her world came crashing down. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said. "We won." "Yay!" Lily's voice was pure joy. "Does that mean Mommy's paintings can stay on the wall?" Marcus smiled through his tears. Of all the things at stake, the penthouse, the money, the properties, his daughter had only cared about one thing: her mother's paintings. "Yes, baby. Mommy's paintings stay on the wall forever." "And Daddy, is the mean lady going to leave us alone now?" Marcus thought about Victoria being led away in handcuffs, about the charges she faced, the years she might spend in prison. "Yes," he said. "She's going to leave us alone now." "Good." There was a pause. "Daddy, can we have ice cream when you get home? Mrs. Patterson says ice cream makes everything better." Marcus laughed a real laugh, the first one in months. "Yeah, baby, we can have ice cream, as much as you want." "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Lily, more than all the stars in the sky." He hung up and looked at his mother. Eleanor was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "She sounds wonderful," Eleanor said quietly. "She is." Marcus hesitated. "Would you... I mean, if you want to, you could meet her. Today. If you're not too busy." Eleanor's composure cracked for just a moment. He saw the longing in her eyes, the years of regret, the desperate hope she was trying to contain. "I would like that," she said carefully. "If you think she'd want to meet me." "She doesn't know you exist," Marcus admitted. "Evelyn and we talked about reaching out, but we weren't sure you'd want to hear from us, after everything that happened." "I would have wanted to hear from you." Eleanor's voice was thick with emotion. "Every day for 20 years I would have wanted to hear from you." Marcus reached out and took his mother's hand. It felt strange and right at the same time. "Then come home with me," he said. "Meet your granddaughter. We'll get ice cream. And maybe we can start figuring out how to be a family again." Eleanor squeezed his hand tightly. "I'd like that, Marcus. I'd like that very much." Together they walked toward the courtroom doors. The battle was over. The war was won. And somewhere in a penthouse on Fifth Avenue, a little girl was waiting for her father to come home and tell her that everything was going to be okay. The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, and Marcus stepped out into the hallway he'd walked 1,000 times before. The familiar smell of the building old wood polish and fresh flowers from Mrs. Chen's apartment 2 doors down wrapped around him like a blanket. But today felt different. Today he wasn't walking home defeated. Today he was walking home free. Eleanor stood beside him. Her usual composure cracked just enough to reveal the nervousness underneath. She clutched her briefcase like a lifeline, her eyes scanning the hallway as if memorizing every detail. "This is where you live?" she asked. "This is where we live," Marcus corrected. "Evelyn and me. And Lily." He paused. "It was Evelyn's before we got married. She said it was too big for one person, that it needed a family to fill it up." "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was." Marcus pulled out his keys. "Mom, before we go in, Lily doesn't know anything about what happened between us. She doesn't know you exist. Evelyn and we planned to tell her when she was older, but then Evelyn got sick and—" "You don't have to explain." Eleanor's voice was gentle. "Just tell me what you want me to say." Marcus thought about it. What did he want? How do you introduce a grandmother who's been absent for an entire lifetime? How do you explain 20 years of silence to an 8-year-old who still believed in fairy tales and happy endings? "Just be yourself," he said finally. "Let her get to know you. She's smart, she'll figure things out on her own." He unlocked the door and pushed it open. "Daddy?" Lily came running from the living room like a small tornado, her braids flying behind her. She launched herself at Marcus, wrapping her arms around his waist with enough force to knock the breath out of him. "You're home. You're home. Mrs. Patterson said you might be late, but I knew you'd come back. I knew it." Marcus knelt down and pulled his daughter into a proper hug. He held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her small heart beating against his chest. "I'm home, baby girl. I told you I would be." "Did you really win? Did the judge say we could stay?" "We can stay. This is our home. Nobody's going to take it away from us." Lily pulled back her face, breaking into a smile so bright it made Marcus's heart ache. She had her mother's smile. Every time he saw it, he felt Evelyn's presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. "Mrs. Patterson made cookies," Lily announced. "Chocolate chip. She said they're for celebrating. Can we celebrate now?" "Absolutely." Marcus stood up, keeping one hand on Lily's shoulder. "But first, there's someone I want you to meet." Lily noticed Eleanor for the first time. Her eyes went wide, taking in the elegant woman in the ivory suit, the silver hair, the face that looked somehow familiar. "Who's that?" Lily whispered, suddenly shy. Eleanor stepped forward slowly, as if approaching a wild animal she didn't want to frighten. She crouched down to Lily's level, her designer suit be damned. "Hello, Lily," she said softly. "My name is Eleanor. I'm—" She glanced at Marcus, uncertain. "She's your grandmother," Marcus said. "My mom." Lily's eyes went even wider. "You have a mom." Despite everything, Marcus laughed. "Everyone has a mom, sweetheart. But you never told me about her. Mommy never told me either." Lily's brow furrowed with suspicion. "Where have you been?" It was such a simple question, such an impossibly complicated answer. Eleanor took a deep breath. "I made some mistakes, Lily. A long time ago, your daddy and I had a disagreement. We stopped talking to each other. I missed a lot of important things because of that. Your birth, your first steps, all your birthdays." "That's a lot of birthdays," Lily said seriously. "I'm 8. That's 8 birthdays." "It is," Eleanor agreed. "And I'm sorry I missed them. I'm sorry I wasn't there." Lily studied Eleanor's face with the intense scrutiny only children can manage. She was looking for something, sincerity maybe, or the kind of truth that couldn't be faked. "Are you sorry for real?" Lily asked. "Or just sorry like when people say sorry but don't mean it?" Eleanor blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I'm sorry for real, Lily. More sorry than I've ever been about anything in my life." "Okay." Lily nodded, apparently satisfied. "Do you want a cookie? Mrs. Patterson made a lot?" Just like that, 20 years of estrangement were set aside by an 8-year-old with chocolate chip priorities. Marcus watched as Lily took Eleanor's hand and led her into the apartment, chattering about the cookies and the artwork on the walls, and the cat named Whiskers that lived next door. Eleanor followed, looking slightly dazed, like a woman who had just witnessed a miracle she didn't quite believe in. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the kitchen, a kindly woman in her 60s, who had been Evelyn's friend long before she became Lily's emergency babysitter. She stopped short when she saw Eleanor. "Oh my," she said. "You must be Marcus's mother. You look just like him. Same eyes." "I'm Eleanor Simmons." Eleanor extended her hand automatically, her professional instincts kicking in. "Thank you for watching Lily today. I understand it was short notice." "Nonsense. Lily's a joy." Mrs. Patterson's eyes crinkled with warmth, but Marcus could see the questions behind them. The whole building probably knew about the court case. News traveled fast in places like this. "We won, Mrs. Patterson," Marcus said. "It's over." Mrs. Patterson's face broke into a relieved smile. "Oh, thank God. I've been praying for you, Marcus. Ever since Evelyn." She stopped, her voice catching. "Well, she'd be proud of you. She always was." "Thank you." Marcus's throat tightened. "For everything. For being there when—" "Hush now." Mrs. Patterson waved away his gratitude. "That's what neighbors are for. Now I'll leave you all to your celebrating. Lily, don't eat too many cookies, or you'll spoil your dinner." "I won't," Lily promised, already reaching for her third. After Mrs. Patterson left the apartment, fell into a comfortable quiet. Lily sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs and working her way through the cookie plate. Eleanor stood awkwardly by the counter, unsure of her place in this home she'd never seen before. Marcus moved through the space, automatically opening the refrigerator, pulling out milk for Lily, starting the coffee maker for the adults. The domestic routine felt strange and sacred at the same time. How many times had he done this exact thing while Evelyn sat at the table sketching in her notebook? "Daddy," Lily said through a mouthful of cookie. "Can I show Grandma my room?" "Grandma?" The word hung in the air like a soap bubble. Fragile, beautiful, ready to pop at the slightest touch. Eleanor's composure cracked completely. Tears welled in her eyes, though she blinked them back furiously. "I would love that, Lily. I would love to see your room." Lily grabbed Eleanor's hand again and tugged her toward the hallway. "Come on, I have a lot of things to show you. Mommy painted my walls. She made it look like a garden. There are butterflies and flowers, and a big sun on the ceiling." Their voices faded as they disappeared down the hall. Marcus stood alone in the kitchen, the coffee maker gurgling beside him, the weight of the day finally settling on his shoulders. He walked to the living room and stood in front of the wall of paintings. Evelyn's paintings. Landscapes and portraits and abstract swirls of color that she'd made over 12 years of marriage. Some were masterpieces, some were experiments. All of them were pieces of her soul left behind for him to guard. "I did it, baby," he whispered. "I kept them safe. I kept Lily safe. I kept everything you built." He touched the frame of his favorite painting, a sunset over the Brooklyn Bridge, painted from the rooftop of the community center where they'd first met. Evelyn had surprised him with it on their 5th anniversary. "Do you remember what you said when you gave me this?" he asked the empty room. "You said, 'This is the spot where my life started over. Where I met the man who showed me that love doesn't have to be complicated. That it can just be simple and good and real.'" His voice broke. "I miss you so much, Evelyn. Every day. Every hour. I see you in Lily's smile. I hear you in the way she laughs. And sometimes late at night I forget you're gone. I reach for you in the dark, and for 1 second, I think you're still there." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "But you're not there. And I have to keep going. For Lily. For the life we built. For everything you believed in." The sound of footsteps made him turn. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her eyes red. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You weren't interrupting." Marcus gestured to the couch. "Sit." Please." Eleanor sat carefully, as if the furniture might reject her. She looked around the room, taking in the paintings, the family photos, the evidence of a life lived with love and intention. "This is beautiful," she said quietly. "Everything here. It's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Something flashier, maybe. More like the Ashford properties I researched. But this—" She shook her head. "This feels like a home. A real home." That was Evelyn. Marcus sat in the chair across from her. She grew up in mansions and penthouses, but she never wanted that for Lily. She wanted our daughter to know what it felt like to be part of a neighborhood, to have friends and teachers and people who knew her name, not just the Ashford fortune. "She sounds remarkable." "You keep saying that." "Because I keep meaning it." Eleanor met his eyes. "Marcus, I spent 20 years convincing myself that you'd made a mistake, that you'd thrown away your potential, your career, your future, all for some woman who'd seduced you with her money. That's not what happened." "I know that now." Eleanor's voice was thick with regret. "I know because I've spent the last 12 hours learning everything I could about Evelyn Ashford Thompson. I read her obituary. I looked at her charity work, her volunteer programs, her art exhibits. I talked to the nurses at the hospital who cared for her at the end." She paused, composing herself. "Do you know what they told me? They told me that even when she was dying, she spent her time comforting them. She told jokes. She asked about their families. She made sure they knew how much she appreciated their care." Marcus felt the tears coming again. That was Evelyn. She couldn't help it. She loved people. All people. She loved you most of all. Eleanor reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "One of the nurses gave me this. She said Evelyn wrote it a few days before she died. She asked the nurse to keep it safe to give it to you if things went badly with Victoria." Marcus took the paper with trembling hands. He unfolded it carefully, as if it might disintegrate at his touch. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably Evelyn's. "My darling Marcus," he read aloud, his voice barely a whisper. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and Victoria has done what I always feared she would do. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from her. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to fight beside you. But I need you to know something." He had to stop. The words blurred through his tears. "Keep reading," Eleanor said gently. "Please." Marcus took a shaky breath and continued. "I need you to know that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. Not the money, not the apartment, not any of the things my family thought mattered. You, your kindness, your strength, your absolute refusal to see me as anything other than who I really am. You made me brave, Marcus. You made me believe that love could be simple and pure and good. You gave me Lily, and she is the greatest gift I've ever received. I don't know what's going to happen after I'm gone. Victoria will try to take everything. She always does. But I want you to fight, Marcus. Fight for Lily. Fight for our home. Fight for the life we built together. And if you need help, if things get too hard, call your mother." Marcus looked up, stunned. "What?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "Keep reading. I know you and Eleanor haven't spoken in years. I know the wound is deep. But I did something I probably shouldn't have. A few years ago, before I got sick, I reached out to her. I sent her pictures of Lily. I told her about our life. I asked her to forgive you for being happy. She never responded. But I kept sending letters anyway. Every year on Lily's birthday, every Christmas, every time something wonderful happened that a grandmother should know about. I don't know if she read them. I don't know if she cares. But I believe in second chances, Marcus. I believe in the power of family to heal. And I believe that somewhere deep down, your mother still loves you. She's just too proud to admit it. So if you're desperate, if Victoria has you backed into a corner, call her. Take a chance, because that's what I did when I married you. I took a chance on a kind man with work boots and a beautiful smile, and it was the best decision I ever made." I love you forever, Marcus. Take care of our girl. Evelyn. Marcus couldn't speak. He sat there, holding the letter, his whole body shaking with sobs. Eleanor crossed the room and sat beside him on the couch. She didn't try to hug him or comfort him with words. She just sat there present, bearing witness to his grief. I got the letters, she said finally. Every single one. I have them in a box in my closet. I read them over and over until the paper started to wear thin. Why didn't you respond? Marcus asked, his voice raw. Pride, stubbornness, fear. Eleanor shook her head. I convinced myself that responding would be admitting I was wrong, and I wasn't ready to do that. Not until last night when you called me. When I heard the fear in your voice. When I realized that my pride had already cost me 20 years and I couldn't afford to lose one more day. She knew, Marcus said wonderingly. Evelyn knew you'd come. She knew I loved you. Eleanor's voice cracked. Even when I was too stupid and stubborn to show it. She saw through all my walls, and she kept reaching out anyway, year after year, giving me chances I didn't deserve. That was Evelyn. Marcus laughed through his tears. She never gave up on anyone. She didn't give up on me. Eleanor took Marcus's hand. And I'm not going to give up on you. Not anymore. Not ever again. They sat there together, mother and son, the letter resting between them like a bridge across 2 decades of silence. From down the hall they heard Lily's voice. Daddy, Grandma, come see the painting Mommy made for me. It's a princess butterfly. Marcus and Eleanor looked at each other. Something passed between them, understanding maybe, or the beginning of forgiveness. She's calling us, Eleanor said. Yeah. Marcus stood up, tucking Evelyn's letter carefully into his pocket. She is. They walked down the hall together, following the sound of Lily's excited chatter, leaving the grief and anger behind them. There would be time for more difficult conversations. Time to unpack 20 years of hurt. Time to learn how to be a family again. But right now, in this moment, there was a little girl who wanted to show her grandmother a princess butterfly. And that was enough. That was more than enough. Lily's room was exactly as Evelyn had left it, a garden paradise painted in soft greens and vibrant flowers, with butterflies of every color dancing across the walls. In the center of the ceiling, a golden sun spread its rays toward every corner, giving the room a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her hand pressed to her heart. Evelyn painted all of this? She asked. Every single stroke. Marcus confirmed. It took her 3 months. She'd work on it at night after Lily went to sleep. She wanted it to be a surprise for Lily's 5th birthday. It's beautiful, Eleanor breathed. It's absolutely beautiful. Lily grabbed her grandmother's hand and pulled her toward the far wall. This is my favorite part. See, it's a princess butterfly. Mommy said it's me. She said I'm strong and pretty and I can fly anywhere I want to go. The butterfly was larger than the others, painted in shades of purple and gold. Its wings were spread wide, catching an invisible wind ready to soar. Eleanor knelt down to look at it more closely. Your mommy was right, she said softly. You are a princess butterfly, and you can fly anywhere you want to go. That's what Daddy says too. Lily leaned against Eleanor's shoulder, natural as breathing. He says Mommy is watching me from heaven. He says she's proud of me. She is proud of you, sweetheart. I'm sure of it. Marcus watched from the doorway, his heart full to bursting. Here was his daughter, this miraculous child, who had lost so much but still knew how to love. Here was his mother, the woman who had hurt him so deeply but had come back when he needed her most. Here was Evelyn's legacy, not the money or the property, but this love, this connection, this family piecing itself back together. Daddy? Lily looked up at him with her mother's eyes. Is Grandma going to stay for dinner? Marcus looked at Eleanor. Would you like to? I would love to. Eleanor's voice was thick with emotion. If you'll have me. We'll have you, Marcus said. Tonight, and every night you want to come. Lily cheered and started making plans for what they'd eat. Eleanor listened with the intensity of someone memorizing every word, storing up memories to replace all the ones she'd missed. And Marcus stood there surrounded by Evelyn's garden, holding on to the hope that had carried him through the darkest months of his life. They had won. Not just the court case, not just the estate, but something far more precious. They had won back their family. 3 months passed like water through open fingers, sometimes slow, sometimes rushing, always carrying them forward into a life Marcus had almost forgotten how to imagine. The autumn leaves had fallen and been swept away. The first snow had come and gone. Christmas lights decorated the windows of apartments up and down Fifth Avenue, and somewhere in the city, carolers were probably singing songs about peace on earth and goodwill toward men. Marcus stood at the window of the penthouse, watching the snow fall over Central Park. Behind him, the apartment buzzed with activity. Eleanor was in the kitchen, arguing with the caterer about the placement of the appetizer trays. Lily was running from room to room in her new purple dress, making sure every detail was perfect. Tonight was the opening of the Evelyn Thompson Memorial Art Center. It had been Lily's idea, born on that first night when Eleanor stayed for dinner. They'd been talking about Evelyn's paintings, about how she'd always dreamed of opening a space where young artists could learn and create without worrying about money or connections. Mommy wanted to help people, Lily had said, her fork pushing peas around her plate. She said art saved her life. She wanted to save other people too. Marcus had looked at Eleanor. Eleanor had looked at Marcus. And somehow, without words, they'd both known what needed to happen. The Ashford estate, once the source of so much pain, became the foundation for something beautiful. Eleanor had handled the legal work, restructuring the family trust, liquidating Victoria's failed business ventures, and channeling the recovered funds into a nonprofit organization. Marcus had found the building, an old warehouse in Brooklyn, not far from the community center, where he and Evelyn had first met. They'd worked on it together, mother and son, rebuilding more than just a building. They were rebuilding a relationship, one conversation at a time, one shared meal at a time, one honest confession at a time. It hadn't been easy. There were arguments, fierce ones, that left both of them shaking. There were tears that neither of them expected. There were moments when Marcus wanted to slam the door and tell his mother that 20 years of silence couldn't be erased by a few months of effort. But they kept trying. Because that's what Evelyn would have wanted. Because that's what Lily deserved. Because sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. Daddy. Lily's voice cut through his thoughts. Grandma says we have to leave in 10 minutes or we'll be late. Marcus smiled. Tell Grandma I'm coming. He took one last look at the snow falling over the park. Evelyn had loved the snow. She'd said it made the city feel clean and new, like a fresh canvas waiting to be painted. I wish you could see this baby, he whispered. I wish you could see what we've built. The elevator ride down felt different than it had 3 months ago. Back then, Marcus had been a man fighting to survive. Now he was a man learning to live again. Eleanor met him in the lobby, impeccable as always, in a silver gown that matched her hair. But there was something different about her now. A softness around the edges that hadn't been there before. You look distinguished, she said, adjusting his tie. You look beautiful. Marcus caught her hand. Mom, thank you. For everything. Don't thank me yet. Eleanor's eyes sparkled. The night is young. I might still do something to embarrass you. You could never embarrass me. I absolutely could, but I'll try to restrain myself. She glanced at her watch. Where's Lily? Right here. Lily came skipping across the lobby, her purple dress swirling around her. She'd insisted on purple because it was Mommy's favorite color. She'd also insisted on wearing the butterfly barrettes that Evelyn had given her for her 7th birthday. You look like a princess, Eleanor said. I am a princess, Lily corrected. A princess butterfly. Mommy said so. Marcus lifted his daughter into his arms. She was getting heavy, growing every day it seemed, but he wasn't ready to stop carrying her yet. He wasn't ready to let go of any of the small moments that reminded him she was still his little girl. "Ready?" he asked. Lily nodded solemnly. "Ready." The car was waiting outside. Marcus helped Eleanor in first, then Lily, then climbed in himself. As they pulled away from the building, he saw Mrs. Patterson watching from her window, waving. He waved back. The art center was already glowing when they arrived. Strings of lights wrapped around the old warehouse, transforming it into something magical. A red carpet stretched from the sidewalk to the front door, flanked by photographers and journalists. "Mr. Thompson! Mr. Thompson!" The flashbulbs started popping the moment Marcus stepped out of the car. He'd gotten used to them over the past few months. The court case had made national news, the story of a widowed father taking on a wealthy CEO of a long-lost mother riding to the rescue of justice, finally being served. The coverage had been overwhelming at first. Reporters camped outside his building. Talk shows called daily begging for interviews. Someone had even approached him about movie rights. Marcus had said no to all of it. He didn't want fame. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to honor his wife's memory and raise his daughter in peace. But tonight was different. Tonight the cameras served a purpose. Every photograph, every article, every mention on social media would bring more attention to the art center. More attention meant more donations. More donations meant more kids getting the chance to create. That was worth a few flashbulbs. "Mr. Thompson, how does it feel to see your wife's dream come to life?" Marcus paused on the red carpet. A young reporter stood in front of him, microphone, extended eyes hungry for a quote. "It feels like she's still here," Marcus said slowly. "Like she never really left. She put so much of herself into everything she did, her art, her family, her community. This center is just an extension of that. It's her love made visible. And your mother, Eleanor Simmons, she's been instrumental in making this happen. How would you describe your relationship now after 20 years of estrangement?" Marcus looked at Eleanor, who was posing for photographs a few feet away. As if sensing his gaze, she turned and smiled at him. A real smile, not the professional mask she wore in courtrooms. "We're still figuring it out," Marcus admitted. "We lost a lot of time. We can't get that back. But we can make the time we have count. That's what we're trying to do." "Any advice for families going through similar situations?" Marcus thought about it. "Don't wait," he said finally. "Don't let pride or anger or fear keep you from the people you love. Because life is short and you never know when you'll run out of chances." The reporter thanked him and moved on to the next interview. Marcus continued up the red carpet, stopping every few feet to shake hands and accept congratulations. He recognized some of the faces: lawyers Eleanor had worked with, art collectors. Evelyn had known volunteers from the community center where they'd first met. But there were also strangers, people who had read about the case and wanted to show their support. The outpouring of goodwill still surprised him. 3 months ago, he'd felt completely alone. Now, everywhere he looked, he saw evidence that he wasn't. That he never had been. Inside the art center was transformed. Evelyn's paintings covered the walls, not just from the penthouse, but from every gallery and collector who had agreed to loan their pieces for the opening. It was the largest exhibition of her work ever assembled, a testament to a life lived with passion and purpose. Lily tugged at his hand. "Daddy, look." She was pointing at the center of the main gallery where a spotlight illuminated a single canvas. It was the Princess Butterfly painting from Lily's room, or rather a larger version that Evelyn had created for this exact purpose. A small plaque beneath it read, "The Princess Butterfly by Evelyn Thompson. Dedicated to my daughter Lily, who taught me that the bravest thing you can do is spread your wings." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Mommy made that for me." "She made it for the world," Marcus said. "But she was thinking of you when she painted it." Lily pressed her hand against the plaque, her small fingers tracing her own name. "I miss her, Daddy." "I know, baby. I miss her too. Do you think she can see us up in heaven?" Marcus knelt down so he was at eye level with his daughter. I think she sees everything we do. I think she's proud of us. I think she's especially proud of you. Why me? Because you're brave. Because you're kind. Because even when everything was scary and sad, you kept smiling. You kept hoping. You kept believing that things would get better. Marcus touched her cheek. That takes a lot of courage, Lily. More courage than most grown-ups have. Lily thought about this. Grandma is brave too, she said. She came back even though she was scared. That's right, she was very scared. But she did it anyway. And you're brave, Daddy. You didn't give up, even when the mean lady tried to take everything away. Marcus pulled his daughter into a hug. We're all brave, he said. That's what makes us a family. The evening unfolded like a dream. Artists mingled with patrons. Children from the neighborhood, the kids who would be the first students at the center, explored the gallery with wide eyes. Food was eaten, toasts were made, and somewhere in the crowd, Marcus heard someone laughing with the pure, unbridled joy of a person discovering something beautiful. Eleanor found him near midnight, standing in front of Evelyn's sunset painting, the one from the Brooklyn Bridge, the one that had started everything. There you are, she said. Lily fell asleep in my office. I put a blanket over her. Thank you. Eleanor stood beside him studying the painting. She really was talented. She was everything. They stood in silence for a moment, mother and son looking at the legacy of a woman who had loved them both. I got a call today, Eleanor said finally. From the prosecutor's office. Marcus tensed. And Victoria's plea deal was accepted. 10 years with possibility of parole in 7. She'll serve time for wire fraud, bank fraud, and tax evasion. The charges related to Evelyn's trust fund are part of a separate civil suit that will likely take years to resolve. 10 years. Marcus let out a long breath. Is that justice? I don't know, Eleanor admitted. Is any prison sentence justice for what she did, for letting her own sister die because of jealousy and greed? She shook her head. Maybe justice isn't the right word. Maybe it's just consequence. She made choices. Now she has to live with them. Like you lived with yours. The question came out sharper than Marcus intended, but Eleanor didn't flinch. Yes, she said quietly. Like I lived with mine. 20 years of consequence for 20 years of pride. The only difference is, I got a second chance. Victoria won't. Do you think she deserves one? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. I think everyone deserves a second chance, she said finally. But not everyone is willing to take it. Victoria chose to blame everyone else for her problems. Evelyn, you the market bad luck. She never once stopped to consider that maybe she was the problem. That's the difference between us, Marcus. I looked in the mirror and hated what I saw. Victoria looked in the mirror and saw a victim. And now, Eleanor turned to face him. Now I look in the mirror and see a grandmother. A mother. A woman who still has work to do, but who finally has people to do it for. Her voice cracked. You gave me that, Marcus. You and Lily. You gave me a reason to be better. Marcus took his mother's hand. It was thin and lined with age, but strong. So strong. Evelyn gave us both a reason, he said. She believed in second chances. She believed in redemption. She believed that people could change if they wanted it badly enough. He squeezed Eleanor's hand. She was right. The Art Center's first class of students began in January. They were 12 kids from the neighborhood, ages ranging from 7 to 17, most of whom had never held a real paintbrush before. They came from families that couldn't afford art supplies, from schools that had cut their art programs from homes where creativity was a luxury no one had time for. Lily insisted on being there for the first day. She stood at the front of the classroom wearing a paint-splattered apron that had belonged to her mother and welcomed each student by name. My mommy believed that everyone is an artist. She told them, her voice clear and confident. She said art isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. It's about telling the truth with colors and shapes instead of words. She held up her mother's palette, the one Evelyn had used for her final painting. This was my mommy's. She's in heaven now. But before she went, she asked me to share it with other kids who love art as much as she did. The students looked at the palette with reverence. One of them, a 13-year-old named Deshaun, who had been skeptical about the whole thing, raised his hand. "Is it true your mom painted the princess butterfly?" he asked. Lily nodded. "She painted it for me. But she said it's really for everyone. She said we're all butterflies. We all start as caterpillars, and we don't know how beautiful we're going to be until we spread our wings." Deshaun considered this. "That's kind of corny." "It's not corny," Lily said firmly. "It's true. You're a caterpillar right now. But if you work really hard, maybe you'll be a butterfly too." Deshaun stared at her for a moment. Then slowly he smiled. "Okay, little butterfly. Show me how to paint." Marcus watched from the doorway, his heart full. Eleanor stood beside him, her arm linked through his. "She's extraordinary," Eleanor whispered. "Just like her mother." "Just like her grandmother," Marcus replied. Eleanor laughed softly. "I had nothing to do with it. You're here now. That's what matters." Spring came early that year. The snow melted, the trees bloomed, and the art center burst with color as students filled canvas after canvas with their dreams. On a warm Saturday in April, Marcus stood on the rooftop of the warehouse, looking out over the Brooklyn skyline. Below him, a community garden was taking shape. Another project Lily had insisted on, another way to bring people together. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson. Saw the article in the Times. Evelyn would be so proud. We all are. He smiled and typed back, "Thank you." Coming to Sunday dinner, wouldn't miss it. Sunday dinners had become a tradition. Every week, Marcus, Lily, and Eleanor hosted an open-door meal at the penthouse. Mrs. Patterson came. Deshaun's family came. Teachers from the art center came. Even a few of the lawyers who had worked on the case came. It was chaotic and loud, and nothing like the quiet dinners Marcus and Evelyn used to share. But it felt right. It felt like the natural evolution of everything Evelyn had built. "Daddy?" Lily's voice echoed up from the stairwell. A moment later, she burst through the rooftop door, her purple jacket flying behind her. "Daddy, you have to come see Deshaun finished his painting, and it's amazing." Marcus let his daughter drag him downstairs back into the warmth and chaos of the life they were building together. In the main gallery, a small crowd had gathered. Deshaun stood nervously beside his canvas, his hands shoved in his pockets, his eyes fixed on the floor. The painting was a portrait of his grandmother, a woman who had raised him alone, who had worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, who had died just 6 months before Deshaun discovered the art center. It was raw and honest and breathtakingly beautiful, the kind of painting that made you stop and feel something you couldn't name. "It's for her," Deshaun mumbled. "She always said I was good at drawing, but I never believed her. Then I came here, and Lily showed me that princess butterfly, and I thought, maybe I could make something beautiful too, for Grandma. So she knows I finally listened." Lily reached up and took Deshaun's hand. "Your grandma can see it," she said. "She's in heaven with my mommy. They're probably looking down right now saying, 'Look at our boys. Look how brave they are.'" Deshaun's tough exterior cracked. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "You think so?" "I know so," Lily said with absolute certainty. "Mommies and grandmas always watch, even when we can't see them." Marcus put a hand on Deshaun's shoulder. "You did good, son. Really good. Your grandmother would be proud." "Thanks, Mr. Thompson." Deshaun wiped his eyes quickly. "And thanks for all this. The center, the classes, everything. I didn't think people like me got chances like this." "Everyone deserves a chance," Marcus said. Everyone deserves someone who believes in them. He looked at Eleanor, who was watching from across the room. She nodded once, understanding passing between them. That's what this place is for, Marcus continued. Not just art. Belief. Belief that you're worth something. Belief that your story matters. Belief that no matter where you come from, you can fly. Deshaun looked at his painting again. Then he looked at Lily. Then he squared his shoulders and stood a little taller. Okay, he said. So, what do I paint next? Lily grinned. Anything you want. That's the whole point. The gala, celebrating the Art Center's first anniversary, was held on a perfect spring evening. The warehouse was packed with supporters, students, and community members. Evelyn's paintings hung on every wall surrounding them with color and light. Marcus stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. Eleanor sat in the front row, Lily on her lap. Deshaun sat beside them, wearing a tie for the first time in his life, and looking deeply uncomfortable about it. 1 year ago, Marcus began, I stood in a courtroom alone and afraid. I had lost my wife. I was about to lose my home. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. He paused, letting the memory wash over him. But I was wrong. I hadn't lost everything. I still had my daughter. I still had hope. And I still had the legacy my wife left behind. Not money, not property, but love. Pure, unconditional love that she poured into everything she touched. He looked at Lily. She waved. This center exists because Evelyn believed that art could save lives. She believed that creativity was a gift everyone deserved to receive. She believed that the world would be a better place if we just gave people the tools to express who they really are. Marcus gestured to the paintings surrounding them. She was right. In 1 year, this center has served over 200 students. We've hosted 15 exhibitions. We've awarded 12 scholarships. And we've proven that when you invest in people, really invest in them, they will amaze you. He looked at Deshaun. Some of you know Deshaun. He walked through our doors a year ago as a skeptical teenager who had never painted anything in his life. Last month, his portrait of his grandmother was accepted into the Brooklyn Museum's Emerging Artists program. The crowd erupted in applause. Deshaun's face went bright red. That's what this place does, Marcus continued. It takes caterpillars and helps them become butterflies, just like Evelyn always said. He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. I miss my wife every single day. I will miss her for the rest of my life. But standing here, surrounded by her art, surrounded by the people she inspired, surrounded by the family that came back to me when I needed them most, I know she's still here. She's in every painting on these walls. She's in every student who picks up a brush. She's in the eyes of our daughter, who has her mother's smile and her mother's heart. Marcus raised his glass. To Evelyn, to second chances, to butterflies. The crowd raised their glasses and echoed, to butterflies. Later, after the speeches were over and the guests had started to leave, Marcus found Lily standing in front of the Princess Butterfly painting. She was alone, her small hand pressed against the canvas. Hey, baby girl. He crouched down beside her. What are you thinking about? Mommy, Lily said simply. I'm telling her about our day. What did you tell her? I told her about Grandma and how she's not scary anymore. I told her about Deshaun and how he's going to be famous. I told her about the garden and how we planted sunflowers because they were her favorite. Lily looked up at her father. And I told her that you're happy now, that you don't cry at night anymore. Marcus felt his throat tighten. How did you know I used to cry? I heard you sometimes. Through the wall. Lily's eyes were wise beyond her years. But you stopped, and now you laugh instead. Mommy would like that. She always wanted you to laugh. Marcus pulled his daughter into his arms. You're the reason I laugh, Lily. You and Grandma. You're my whole world. Mommy's still part of your world too, Lily said. She's just in a different place. A place where she can watch everything and be proud. You think she's proud? Lily nodded firmly. I know she is. She told me. She told you. In my dreams. She comes to visit sometimes. She says she loves us. She says we're doing good. She says. Lily paused, her brow furrowing with concentration. She says the best stories don't end when someone dies. They keep going with all the people who loved them. Marcus held his daughter tight, tears streaming down his face. That's exactly right, baby. That's exactly right. They stayed there for a long time, father and daughter standing in front of the princess butterfly, surrounded by love that death could not diminish. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, the paintings glowed with color. And somewhere in a place beyond seeing, but not beyond feeling, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile watched over them. Her story hadn't ended. It was just beginning again in everyone she'd touched, in everyone who carried her memory forward in the wings of 1,000 butterflies learning to fly. Victoria Ashford spent her first night in federal prison staring at a concrete ceiling. Marcus Thompson spent that same night reading bedtime stories to his daughter. And Eleanor Simmons spent that night doing something she hadn't done in 20 years. She prayed. Not for victory, not for success, not for any of the things she used to think mattered. She prayed for more time. Time to know her granddaughter. Time to rebuild her relationship with her son. Time to become the person she should have been all along. Some people never get second chances. Some people get them and waste them. But some people, the lucky ones, the brave ones, the ones who are willing to change, get second chances and make them count. Marcus Thompson was one of those people, and as he kissed his daughter goodnight and turned off the light, he knew that Evelyn was watching. She was always watching, and she was proud.